patch 10.22, 10.20, 10.22. Yeah, we'll go with that. 10.22. It is launching tomorrow. We've already gotten some highlights of it. So let's dig right into it and talk about what is changing. So system changes. Players now take a minimum of 1 damage on losses. So if you were facing a clone and you won the round with just a ZZ, or you lost the round to a ZZ rot, like your opponent had nothing else left but a ZZ rot, you would take no damage. So that's been changed, so it's clear that you actually lost the round by taking 1 damage. Next, there's a new tooltip. If you click the Fates icon, that's usually lit up to tell you that you can get a Chosen. If you click that, it'll now tell you the roll odds for finding a Chosen at that level. Next, trait changes. So there's a couple... there's some significant trait changes going on here. The first two are the Cultist and Keeper. The way their Chosens function. So, as it stood, if I'm remembering correctly, for Cultist, if you had a Cultist Chosen, that Cultist Chosen counted, as you bought it, as 3 stacks. So, you had 1 extra stack for it being Chosen, and 2 stacks for it being level 2. So, it counted as 3, if I'm correct. Now they're changing it so it's straight up double the amount of stacks for Cultist. So instead of being for 3 stacks, it is now 4 stacks. This makes Cultist a much better opener. So Cultist kind of fell away because its opener became pretty bad. But on, like, before actual PvP rounds, being able to pick a Chosen Cultist and it already having 4 stacks, very, very strong. Just means you can pick up 1 other Cultist and bam, you have a 5 stack already on a Cultist, and that's very, very, very strong opener on just 2 units. So this 100% will make Cultist openers way better. This doesn't really scale as much into the late game unless your Chosen Cultist actually gets up to 3-star. Then it probably does stack up pretty well. But Cultist overall probably is not really an endgame comp. There's going to be something else that has to be run with it in order for it to be good. Keeper is getting a similar change. So a Chosen Keeper now counts as 2 Keepers. Therefore, it will grant double the shields. This one's a little more interesting on how it transitions because, much like Cultist, this makes Keeper really good in the early game. Because that's a gigantic ass shield for your early game keepers, and considering the fact you only have to win 1 because it's Chosen, so it already counts as 2 to proc the trait, and on top of that gets double the shields. Yeah, it's gonna make early keepers really strong. At the same time, this is probably something that could make Keeper 4 a lot better. I don't think Keeper 6 is ever going to be a thing. But this could make Keeper 4 a little more interesting because it allows you to get a lot of shields while having a Chosen Keeper. So you only have to put 3 Keepers in play. In a lot of compositions, that's not actually that hard to do. It's not something that I would say you're going to actively try to do. But if you have this empty slot in, you have a Keeper on the bench, chuck it in, bam, Keeper 4. And you get giant stacks of shields. Again, I don't think this will play out well in the late game, but in the early game and even into the mid game, it's probably going to make Keeper a lot better. Oh, Dazzler. So, we've known for a while that Dazzler is underwhelming. It doesn't really feel like it does anything, despite the fact that this is a big number and this is a long time period, as is this. But I'm of the opinion that the problem with Dazzler is twofold. One, you're never going to run 4 Dazzler. The traits just don't line up unless you have a Chosen Dazzler. And that way you can drop out one of the weaker Dazzlers that doesn't fit into your composition. So the only way you could ever really run Dazzlers with Dazzler 4 with a Chosen. Just running natural 4 Dazzlers is like really difficult. And it doesn't match up very well. But in general, there's almost no comps that run Dazzler. It's kind of meaningless in the early game. It's kind of meaningless in the mid game. Sometimes you can get it to work in the late game, but it's mostly off the fact that the CC on Lux is really strong. And that's another problem. All the Dazzlers already have CC built in. So when you're doing a damage reduction, like, what does a damage reduction do when Lux's ult is what causes it and has them CC'd for over half this duration? So, the logical thing that they have done is, they've set the Dazzler duration time to 8 seconds. It's just straight up 8 seconds. On one hand, this is very long. On the other hand, this being long didn't mean anything. So, 8 seconds makes Dazzler 2 a lot better because you don't have that issue, as I was stating with Lux, where Lux ults over a whole bunch of units, but half of this Dazzler duration is the time that the unit was already CC'd anyway. So you actually get that time back to have this damage reduction. The other side of it that I've heard a lot of people complaining about is this 80%. The difference between 50% and 80% is incredibly significant. You might as well not even be doing damage. Like, this effectively doubled a unit's health. This effectively multiplies it by 5. But only for AD. So, I'm kind of in the middle on this. I think Chosen Dazzler could be very strong, but at the same time, fitting it into comps feels very difficult. The only comp that I've ever seen Dazzler function in, Dazzler 4 at least, function in, is Enlightened, which is where likely I think you're going to see people try to do this. I'm just curious how effective this is going to be, because you have to remember, this is only an AD damage reduction. There's like only 2 builds that do AD damage in Ashe, and well, you have Ashe, you have Duelist, and what's the other one? Oh, Enlightened, because Talon does a ton of physical damage, or AD damage. So, I'm on 2 minds of this. I think it will make Dazzler 2 way more useful. I'm not hard set on 4, because I'm pretty sure you're just going to have a Dazzler chosen in order to make this useful. But there are more things coming to Dazzler later in this patch, as we'll get to, and they might cause more problems than this particular change, but we'll get to that a bit later. Ninja 4 AD and spell power reduced from 150 to 140. That's fair. Ninja, when they were going to nerf War Week out of existence with the B patch, there was a lot of worry that Ninja was going to rise and destroy everything, and luckily they were smart enough to understand this and nerfed Akali down. So they still see that Ninja is way too strong. So they're just giving a 10 AD spell power nerf to Ninja. I think that's wise. There are more nerfs coming later that probably are going to be more significant, but this is good. Sharpshooter damage reduction per ricochet. So they're buffing 2 sharpshooter and they are nerfing 6 sharpshooter. The buff to 2, a lot of people are talking the nerf to 6, but the buff to 2 has me very interested. The buff to 2 sharpshooter. 2 sharpshooter is actually a legit opening now. Ever since they buffed Nadine, making it so that the range on her ult, basically they doubled the buff damage on her ultimate. That made Nadine a very strong opening carry. So they're effectively buffing that opening with this 2, and I don't even think that was the goal of this particular change. They're just buffing it. I'm just kind of like, wow, I can't believe they did that. Yeah, I expect Nadine openers to be just great. Why not run it? Nadine, Teemo, and just kind of laugh your way, as the damage is going to be insane. The 6 nerf is because 6 sharpshooter is crazy and just kind of below. It's definitely an S tier comp right now, along with Ahri. Those two comps are clearly the 2 best comps in the game right now. So they decided to nerf 6. I think the hope is that by nerfing 6, we see more people play 4, and we get some variance of sharpshooter, and it's not just play 6 sharpshooters and get your chosen. this will hopefully have an opening that more people will play 4. And that way, if more people are playing 4, they don't have to play the shitty sharpshooter in Vayne. Because right now, Vayne's just a trait bot. Champion changes. Fiora's chosen bonus is changing from a health bonus to maximum mana reduction. It's actually a buff that makes her a lot stronger, and no one's going to care because no one's going to play her. Lissandra. This is one that has sparked a lot of outcry, I think. So, Lissandra's targeting priority has changed from the target she is currently attacking to the target with the highest attack damage. Now, the idea of this was to make Dazzler more useful by making Lissandra hit whatever is dealing the most damage. What I find interesting about this change, and what I have to think about, because I'm kind of unsure about this one. A lot of people are saying that Lissandra's already really strong and this just makes her stronger. I'm not quite sold on that argument yet. This probably does make her better, but not in the way that I think people were thinking this change was. Because Lissandra is actually a legit early game carry. You can make a Lissandra, give her a crit gauntlet, and just kind of laugh as her ult just blows the entire field away. The problem with this change is that this change makes it so that her ult is going to hit less units. I think that's important to realize. Lissandra's ult is not going to hit as many units as it used to, because it was attacking the first target. So you would position her so that way she would hit the front line and blow up the entire front line. Now her ult's going to, if it's, suppose it's a ranged carry that your opponent has, that ult's now going to travel over that front line and basically only ult maybe 2 units in the back line. So, yeah, it's going to blow up the back line, but you're going to get blown up by the front line now. You're not wiping the entire field of your opponents. Now, I do think this is probably still a buff to Lissandra, but I don't think it's as out of control as people realize. As people think, I should say. This was one that we're going to have to watch, though, because I think a lot of people are actually going to complain about this later, because this is an AoE attack that's no longer hitting multiple things. That's just my thought. We'll see where it goes from there. Vayne bonus true damage is going up. I have nothing else to say because Vayne is bad. Vi getting a shitload of buffs. The chosen bonus is changing from health to max mana reduction. Great change. Vi's ult is interesting in that she often the frontliner that Vi is hitting is nearly dead by the time Vi gets her ult off on it. So you're basically shredding armor on things that are nearly dead, which is awkward. Same time, they're buffing Vi 3 and increasing the armor shred from 6 seconds to 8 seconds. This is a really good buff to Vi. Vi usually gets thrown out on a lot of the Brawler Ashe comps. You should probably think about keeping her again. Just saying. Whether she's a carry, I don't know, but she actually is a very strong champion. More people should be playing her. She just ends up falling by the wayside because she's a 2 cost, and you have to put an investment into 2 costs you don't want to put into, because you don't want to sell them later in the game. Tier 3. Akali mana lock after spell cast is going from 1 second to 1.25 seconds. Effectively, air quotes, effectively, my understanding is that this means that Akali now needs to do 2 autos before ulting. It's a nerf to Akali. It's not as damaging as people think it is, because it basically means you're probably not going to put blue buff on Akali anymore. It opens up that slot to actually put another item that does damage with Akali. So it's a nerf, but it's not a nerf that's going to destroy Akali or destroy ninjas. This is probably the best change they could have done with Akali, in my opinion. Evelynn 3, huge damage buff. Evelynn is very underplayed. Evelynn is actually a very, very strong champion that nobody plays because she's a cultist, and you have other carries that you can run in cultists, most notably Jhin. And 2, she's a shade, and everyone has decided that Zed is just straight up the better shade than Evelynn. So I don't think this will change, but if you end up getting chosen Shade Evelynn and you still decide you wanted to run the Zed comps, there's a good reason to go for Evelynn 3 now. I usually did because Evelynn's just uncontested in entire lobbies. So it's pretty easy to get Evelyn up to 3-star. So I would keep this change in mind when you're running shades. Nunu 3, buffed. Buffed the damage on the alt. Occasionally, I usually only see Nunu 3 when someone gets chosen Nunu. Because Brawler Ashe is a pretty contested comp. So I don't know if this change was really needed. I think you just never really saw it because of how contested the comp was. That's just my thought. I don't really know how this is going to work out, at least in my opinion. Tier 4 changes. Ahri Spirit Bomb. Nerf at 1-star and 2-star. I think people have said this pretty clearly, that Ahri is just GP of this set, where if Ahri one-shots everything, she's the best unit in the game, and if she one-shots nothing, she's the worst unit in the game. We're kind of at that point. The problem is these numbers don't change what I see as the core issue with what makes Ahri so good. What I see makes Ahri so good is Crit Gauntlet. You put Crit Gauntlet on Ahri, you spin the wheel to see if you get the crit. Oh, you got the crit, you wiped out your opponent's entire board. Yay! It's a good change. I just don't know how effective it is when everyone just puts Crit Gauntlet on Ahri anyway. Ashe. So Ashe had a bug. Basically, only the first shot of Ashe's flurry could crit or be dodged. So this made IE really bad on her. Now IE is really good on her, so you can put IEs back on Ashe now. And 2, this part made her really good against Jax. So your duelist frontliner would like get completely melted by Ashe for no reason at all. Well, this is why. So that's been fixed. Morgana. Okay, we need to talk about Morgana. Morgana's probably getting the strongest buff of this entire patch. I'm going to go ahead and say that outright. And there's going to be some math involved with this. So I need to get MSPaint open. Yeah, we're MSPainting this, guys. Okay. Here is your opponent's clump. Your opponent's clump is here. Your clump is here. Your opponent has one assassin. The assassin jumps over here and is here, and your opponent's clump stands here and does its clumpiness. Your Morgana, the way your Morgana used to work was Morgana would pick a random target and throw the ult down. So if this was an 8v8 fight, 8v8, there was a 7 in 8 chance you would hit the clump, and a 1 in 8 chance you'd hit this random assassin that jumped into the back line. Really frustrating when you got this 1 in 8. This also could be expanded, like, if they had 2 assassins, which is probably more likely, you had a 3 in 4 chance of hitting the clump and a 1 in 4 chance of hitting the 2 assassins. It was really awkward. Alright, so, where's the eraser? I don't use paint enough. Where's my eraser? Eraser! Yay. For demonstration, we'll keep it to 2 assassins, because that probably makes more sense. So, if it's 2 assassins, then clump, bigger. Always go bigger. Clump. If there were 2 assassins jumping, it was a 3 in 4 chance of hitting the clump. Yeah, we'll just leave it like that. We're not going to say anything. 1 in 4 chance. Now we're going to change it to the new targeting priority. So this is old. So now we have the 2 assassins jump over. The way Morgana's new priority works is that she's going to randomly pick 2 units instead. And then she's going to ult on top of whichever one has more units around it. So whatever would be more optimal between those 2 units. Okay? So we have 2 assassins jumping. So with the 2 assassins jumping, that means you have a 2 in 8 chance, 2 in 8 chance of selecting one of the assassins, And then you have to pick another unit. So you have a 1 in 7 chance of picking the second assassin. This is important to remember. So you have a 2 in 8 chance of the first, 1 in 7 in the second. The two other ones, it doesn't matter. If you pick any unit out of this clump, you're going to hit this clump, because you're only going to hit 2 units here. So if between those two, anyone in the clump is picked, you're always going to hit the clump. But in this particular case where 2 assassins jumped, you have a 2 in 8 on the first, 1 in 7 on the second. So the odds of picking both of the assassins that jumped is 2 in 56. Which, if you want to reduce that, 1 in 28. So your odds of hitting just the assassins in the old version was 1 in 4. Your odds of hitting the assassins in the new version is 1 in 28. You're going to hit that clump nearly every damn time in this situation. This is a huge buff on the targeting priority for Morgana. And this is probably the biggest change in this entire patch, and we're going to see nerfs on Morgana. Like, I'm going to tell you right now, this change is so significant that you're going to see huge nerfs on Morgana. That has been my MSPaint video. Oh, and if there's only one assassin, you actually just always hit the clump. Because you're always going to pick between one unit in the clump and the assassin. You're just always going to hit the clump. So, like I said, it's not going to have the amount of times that you end up hitting the assassins. It's more like 5 times the difference. Like, it's actually crazy how big a buff that this is to Morgana. Alright, 5 costs. Ezreal. Ezreal's starting mana is going from 75 to 90. This is actually a pretty good change for him. And kind of gets at one of the beefs that I've had with Ezreal most of the time. He kind of dies a lot. He often just kind of gets poked out and dies before he ever gets to ult. So this means 2 less autos for him to ult. His ult will happen well into combat when it's not overly useful to be slowing down the attack speed on everything. It's just this doesn't do what I need it to do. By making it happen faster, it's more likely that he's going to actually use his ult and have it be actually useful in combat. So this is a really good buff, and I suspect that you'll see more. Ezreal doesn't even often see play in Elderwood Ash, unless you're running actually 6 Elderwoods, which even then sometimes you don't see Ezreal. You should see Ezreal now. Ezreal is going to be a pretty good champion, and I think we're going to see more builds on him if it's 2 less autos to get that ult down. Lee Sin is getting a nerf, and we have to explain why Lee Sin is getting a nerf. So Lee Sin's ult, when he ults, it was a really long stun. So he would stun, he'd have to walk up to you and ult you again to knock you off the battlefield. It seems like it was okay at the time, but I'm going to throw a curveball in here, because I did this once, and it was freaking hilarious. If you put an RFC on Lee Sin, it gives him range on his ult. So I did this once, and he proceeded to beat a 4-star Diana in the face. He hit that 4-star Diana in the face and knocked her to the edge of the board. When he knocked her to the edge of the board, he was still in melee range, because he had an RFC on him. So he proceeded to hit that Diana again, and again, and again, and was able to ult that Diana off the board before the Diana ever attacked. That is probably why we are seeing this nerf. Because that is ridiculous. If you can protect a Lee Sin with an RFC, he can 1v9. Because he can do things like that with an RFC. Lee Sin was kind of ninja really good. His stats are actually pretty poor, so you do kind of have to protect him, which is why an RFC is kind of ridiculous on him. He was also an auto-elimination to any unit your opponent put on the sides. If you were to match him up against a unit on the side, he just instantly pushed it off the battlefield, and it was like, why did you put your unit there? I had a Lee Sin. So he kind of did need this nerf, so that way he doesn't just lock a unit up and instantly knock it off the battlefield with RFC. Lilia, damage to break, sleep. So if my understanding of League is correct, because I don't actually play League and I barely watch it, The sleep on Liliana takes a specific amount of damage to break. And in League, there's ways you can kind of abuse that to make it so that you keep a unit slept longer and then hit it with something really heavy that will kill it all at once. In an auto battle, you don't have that level of control. That's actually pretty hard to do. So increasing this damage to break made it pretty common for Lilia to ult a unit that you were never actually going to go in combat with, and there was really nothing you could do to kill it. It just went to sleep, and Lilia really didn't do anything besides CC 2 units, which as a 5 cost, you kind of want to get a little bit more out of Lilia than just a low level CC. So this is actually a buff. The damage to break sleep is being lowered to just a floor threshold of 500 damage. So your units that are actually hitting whatever's asleep should be able to break this and get the bonus damage to kill that unit. So this is pretty much straight up a buff, but it's not clear. I don't think that's very clear to people. Set chosen. Much like Vi, there was really no reason. Why are you giving brawlers extra health on their chosen? So instead they're changing up the spell power. Fair. I'm glad they clarified this, because I believe they weren't very clear on the set damage buff, because they were giving a huge damage buff to Set's ult, and it was like, what? Why? But they made it clear it's just the primary target. So what Set grabs and what he slams, that is what the damage buff is going to. The idea of this is that he should be, when he grabs something, it should die. But it usually wasn't dying at 1 star, and it was kind of just doing nothing at 1 star. So they're buffing it so that he might actually kill something. Okay? Nunu will no longer eat Set if he still needs to do setups, which, I mean, it was a bug, but it was a bug that was theoretically correct, I guess. Item changes. Luden's Echo bonus damage. So much like what they did with Static Shiv used to do bonus damage to crowd control and shielded, and then they changed it to shielded. Luden's Echo will do the opposite. It will just do bonus damage to crowd control units. Currently, this doesn't really do anything. The only unit that really runs Luden's is the Bubble Bobble build with Nami. In which case, that build is really good. Well, I shouldn't say really good. It's pretty good. So this shouldn't change too much. The only other unit that I will commonly put Ludens on is a Kali. Whether or not you'll actually do that, I don't know. Your unit has to be crowd controlled to get the bonus damage, so I don't think this really changes too much in the current game. Rabadon's Deathcraft spell power is getting a buff. It doesn't matter. Like I said, Crit Gauntlet's where all the spell power items are going these days anyway. Ruin's Hurricane. This is an interesting change. A lot of people have kind of been talking about this. So the bolt damage on Hurricane is going from 75 to 100% damage. So Hurricane's kind of in a place where it's pretty useless. Very few people put it on any unit right now. Back in the old days of the previous set, you would put it on Master Yi and give him a rapid fire cannon to give him a range attack, and he would just kind of machine gun out these bolts that would kill things. You don't really have a unit that does that in the current set, mostly because all the ones that would do that, their ult is melee range. Their ult is specifically melee range. So you don't really have that. The other use of Hurricane used to be Jin Deathblade Hurricane. I suspect with this change, Deathblade Hurricane will be the optimal build on Jin. That's kind of just my thought. Jin's been getting a pretty significant variety of items that you can build. But I think this change will make it so that Deathblade Hurricane is probably very optimal. Especially in a sharpshooter comp where he can get those Deathblade stacks up pretty hot, pretty quickly. Static Shiv. Why? Why are we doing more bonus damage on Static Shiv? I got nothing. I don't know. The one thing I will say about Static Shiv is that the only thing that Static Shiv really should, air quotes, should be very functional on is things with really fast attack speed. Right now, the two things that can do that are Duelist and Ash. We have not been putting Static Shiv on Ash. We're probably never going to be putting Static Shiv on Ash. Unless we're putting Static Shiv on Ash, I don't think we're actually ever going to be building Static Shivs again. That said, shields are everywhere. Like, so many units use shields. I'm in two places on this, in that it only doing the bonus damage to shielded enemies is very awkward. But at the same time, like, half the units in the game have shields. Like, probably more than that, really. Now, the question is, what do you put a Static Shiv on? Are we still going to go... Are we going to go back to War Week? I mean, I would think that if we were going to be putting Static Shiv on something, it would be on Ash. But we don't put Static Shivs on Ash. So, I don't know what to say about this change. Some bug fixes to Static Shiv, so it would actually hit units that are meaningful. Zeke's is getting a nerf from 40% attack speed bonus to 35. 40 was probably a slight overshot. 35 sounds like a sweet spot to me. I'm a little surprised they're not doing the same thing to Chalice. Chalice was kind of in the same position with that buff. It's like they overshot it just a tad. It was the right change to make, but it was just overshot just a bit. And I think they'll probably bring that down to 35 as well. ZZ Rot taunt duration going from 2 seconds to 1 second. This is more a bug fix more than anything else. Adding the taunt to ZZ Rot did some really weird things in the game. And you're going to see, like, through these next 2 points and in the bug fixes, they had to change a bunch of stuff to make this so that it wasn't, like, bugging the game out completely. But, yeah, this was making some weird interactions where units just didn't attack. They were making, like, these weird routings to attack this unit that they're taunted by, and it was just really weird shit happening on the battlefield anytime you put a ZZ Rot portal on something. So I wouldn't think of this really as a nerf, particularly in the way that targeting works in the game. If you start attacking something, you're not gonna stop attacking it unless there's some reason it becomes untargetable. So the duration of a taunt isn't really that meaningful, outside of the fact that you're stuck in this thing where I need to go hit this thing in the face, and you spend 10 minutes trying to figure out how you hit that thing in the face. That's what this is supposed to reduce and fix. So this is a good change. And it's not really that much of a nerf. It's not even really a nerf, in my opinion. Oh, this is the ZZ Rot construct. Someone had a typo, and it did 10 more AD for some reason. Also, fix the bug where you could access initial taunt by equipping a ZZ Rot in mid-combat. That's a bug we're going to get to in a second, because that's a funny bug. Divine unit reduction no longer reduces true damage. Yeah, that's a good change. Why did we make Divine so good again? Exile will no longer fail to create a shield when placed next to a Galio summon. Hey, turns out you were up against a guy that was running Cultist, and... Don't put your Yasuo... Galio spawns exactly where everyone puts their Yasuos. It was so rage-inducing. Talon's attacks will now run through attack flow when attacking with a spell. So his spell is now considered an attack, is what they're saying here. So you can use it with Shiv, Rage Blade, whatever. Taunts will no longer persist if the taunter becomes untargetable. So this was a cool thing that I discovered on this patch. If you have been Zephyred and you drop a ZZ Rot portal onto the unit that has been Zephyred, it gets taunt. And taunts everything into attacking something it can't attack. This stops that. Thankfully. Let's scroll back up to the patch highlights. So overall, there's a lot of thought that Dazzler is going to be way stronger. I think you'll see 2 Dazzler a lot more. 4 Dazzler is kind of a stretch because it's only can fit into very specific comps. Vi will be a little more optimal in Brawler Ash, so you're probably going to be playing moreVis instead of dropping your Vis for other Brawlers. Hurricane probably means we're going to see more Deathblade Hurricane Jins. Static Shiv is going to do something. We don't know what it is, but it's going to do something. Ninja Ninjas overall is going to be a weaker comp due to the Kali nerf. Probably more to the Kali nerf than the actual straight Ninja nerf. But it's still going to be a playable comp. It's like an A plus comp now. It'll probably be like an A minus, B plus comp. It's still something that you can play and it should still be good. Sharpshooter, though, might not be an S comp anymore. That nerf to Sharpshooter 6 probably means you're going to have to... It means you're going to have to rethink a little bit on how you want to play that. It might not be valuable playing 6 Sharpshooters. It might make a lot more sense playing 4. We'll see. Zeke's tiny nerf. It's probably still good, but there's probably better things that you can build in the early game that are more valuable. And Lissandra, we're going to have to keep our eye on her. The change to her targeting priority will either make her incredibly strong or kind of meh. But we'll see on that. Anyway, that's all I got for these patch notes. This patch will be up later today because I am posting up this video tomorrow. So, enjoy the games.